One of the major projects that we took on was working with the Department of Education. What were the levers that the best performing schools used was the question we were trying to answer. After working on that project, the government decided not to pursue any of the action items that would improve schools across the globe. They basically put it on a shelf and said, don't talk about this anymore.
You have spoken to over 500 world-renowned experts. How has that changed you? Would you have said you're the expert when you started?
No, not really. A passionate hobbyist is how I considered myself. I was mostly coming at this from my main sport, which was like marathon running and trail running and that sort of thing. As far as I was concerned there, like I was finishing pretty quickly, but nowhere near like elite pro level or anything like that. So I was just kind of like getting into this as a strong passion. You know, I've always loved the world of movement and getting outside, sports, that sort of thing. I think as the years went on and I talked to more people, extremely bright, intelligent, well-researched, and those sorts of folks, I was surprised by the fact that if I sat down and like read their books, if I spent the weekend before going through their work and getting deep, then I kind of could hang with them. That did surprise me because I didn't consider myself like near their level, especially in their domains. But if you do your homework, you can really perform at an incredible level with some of the best world-class people out there. And I think that's important to know. Like, you'll be bad at first, but if you put in the time practicing your craft, whether that's cooking or an instrument or a sport or something like that, you can get there. But it's really all through consistency. None of this happens like magic out of the blue.
There's a reason why we move towards health, right? Particularly this field of health. What's your reason?
So I shared that I've always been really passionate about being outside, moving, hiking, and that sort of thing, which means you kind of need to keep your eye on the ball if you want to be competitive. So that was kind of a driver when I was younger. But as the years went on, I found myself paying off my loans, working in strategy and management consulting as my first career after college. One of the major projects that we took on was working with the federal government, Department of Education, and looking at what improved outcomes in schools. I wanted to be a part of the solution. It's a cliche, make the world a better place. But mostly you want to have like meaning and purpose in your life with like knowing that if you work hard, there's going to be some payoff for the people around you or the people coming up. And so I worked on a project for more than a year, kind of digging into the best schools out there that changed student outcomes from being dropouts or really low levels of performance to not only attending school, but then going on to continue their education. What were the main drivers of this? What were the levers that the best performing schools used was the question we were trying to answer. So after more than a year partnering up with all sorts of institutions and doing this work, we kind of found a number of answers. The lever that changed student outcomes was food, having high quality food available at the places where these kids were being educated. For me, that was a huge surprise, but I saw this pattern repeated over and over again. After working on that project, basically the government decided not to pursue any of the action items that would, if they put any of this into place, it could improve schools across the globe. They basically put it on a shelf and said, don't talk about this anymore. Like we paid you, move on to the next project. In my late 20s, that was devastating, absolutely devastating. And I'm like, I never want this to happen again. I don't want to feel like I'm wasting my time.
It's so interesting to that point. I met this scientist who works for the government. It was just a dinner party, so I could talk to him, candidly. I said, so I know you can't tell me, any secrets, but is there anything that you're doing that you wish you could talk about, that you feel is a crime that you're not getting to talk about it? And he said, well, it's not necessarily here in the US, but there's things that are going on in third world countries that we have solutions for. Like we literally could go into that country, we could solve everything that they're struggling with, and we can't because it's military secrets. And he said, so that feels horrible that we see someone crying for help, we can help them, and we can't do it due to legalities and politics.
I never want this to happen again. I don't want to feel like I'm wasting my time here on Earth. And so that's when I really started writing about health, sharing some of these things that I'd learned about how health and food can really change the state of our bodies, the states of our minds, and our performance overall. And then through my own personal experience, kind of losing my health in my 20s, gaining a bunch of weight, having thyroid problems and high blood pressure, high triglycerides, all that, turning that around completely. I was mad enough to start up my podcast and just keep going. And this is one of those things where like I've considered many times, like, should I just stop? Should I give up? Am I tired? Like, is this worth it to keep going? And it pretty much always is, because I can't imagine ever giving up the opportunity to spend quality, uninterrupted time with some of the smartest, most passionate, generous people on earth, talking about how can we make all of this better through simple factors that are accessible to most people. So I love having these conversations, and I think hopefully I'll be able to do it forever.
It almost sounds like you haven't had to face any imposter syndrome or anything around that piece
I
of
don't want
it.
to give that impression.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, I'm like, what are you? Are we a machine? You're not a man. You're not a man. I'm a machine.
Everybody has the moments of imposter syndrome, of just feeling like you're not up to snuff in one way or another. Or, at your weakest moments when you're really, really tired, but also sometimes at your best moments. You don't want to show up for the workout. I don't want to show up for the interview. I don't want to have to do this today, or I'd rather just kick back or whatever. I think we all get there. But the thing that separates the people who really perform at a high level from the more normal level of performance are the people who do it anyway, but also critically schedule time to rest and recover from that activity, whatever that activity is. It's not generally this frantic thing where you're just out there all the time doing all these things. It's a very strategic and consistent approach to training and performance.
Is that something you learned, though? I can't imagine you knew that in your 20s.
Well, I learned a lot of this through music, so it's interesting because if you think about the world of building a business or entrepreneurship or kind of starting your own thing, it's remarkable for musicians in some ways because a lot of those skills are directly transferable. When I first tried to get gigs as like a teenager, for example, I would have to go into places and really put myself on the line. I'd have to introduce myself to people, put my heart out there, and music is a very emotional thing, right? So you sharing your personal songs with someone, if they think that it's crap and they don't want you to play there or ever see you again, you could take that very personally, especially as a teenager. Putting yourself out there, recruiting a team of people to play with you who you can compensate in one way, managing the finances of all of this. This is what I started doing as an early teenager, not just selling lemonade, but actually getting out there, playing gigs, live performances, trying to recruit people and get them to play with you, pay them, recruit people to come to the show as an audience, get a newsletter going and try to build this community around. It's I found that shifting gears into the world of entrepreneurship after college and working in traditional business after a while, I was actually pulling a lot more skills from my experience as a kid trying to book gigs and play gigs than I did from all of my Ivy League education and fancy time at private schools and all of that stuff. In fact, I needed to unlearn a lot of that in order to really excel in the world of business, because it gets hairy, especially when you're bootstrapping and you're going after it. You don't know what's going to work or what's going to stick, and you need to stay nimble and you need to stay humble because we all go through the hard times. Yeah.
This is so interesting because I want to make a leap here and jump to a topic that I wanted to get to later, but I find this mindset, it wasn't my schooling that I leaned on, it was actually my bootstrapping. Well, what if we equate that to interpretation around health science? Where do you lean in terms of this is what I use to determine what's of value around health science, and this is what I don't?
I think it's much more about foundational principles, and I'm very skeptical of any gimmickry. In the world of health, there's this whole cloud of hype and gimmickry. This idea of biohacking or shortcuts, using this one thing that's going to solve all of your problems, that can be very, very powerful for corporations and for businesses to kind of get an edge in there. But the people who have long careers, I was just talking to Paul Chek the other day and some of these other people who have been literally working in the world of holistic health and beyond for 4+ decades. And these people are extraordinarily skeptical of all of this gimmickry and gadgetry, because the truth of the matter is it's really about these foundational principles of moving your body, never really letting yourself lose the standard of maintaining strength. It's not about bodybuilding or going to the gym. It's about having the standard of never getting weak and flabby and losing your ability to contribute to society and be useful and that sort of thing. It's coming from this completely different perspective than the typical world of health where you're just scrolling around on TikTok or Instagram and they're just hey, you need to eat broccoli for 28 days straight and that's going to solve all your problems, or you need to put this on your face, you got to buy this thing. All this consumer-based self-care is really not serving people as much as it's serving these corporations and these people with new gadgets and things to put out there. Yes, some of these new technologies can be extraordinarily useful and powerful. They can be really expensive. I've tried a lot of them. 9 out of 10 of them are not worth it. And then every once in a while, you do find some really cool cutting edge stuff. But then usually you find out that cutting edge stuff only seems cutting edge to you because it's actually been around since the turn of the century. Something changed through technology or regulation that now we have access to it. There's not that much new that's going to completely change the game. So it's worth putting in the education to just learn how to eat in a way that's honoring our ancestors and all around real food, and then hopefully move in a similar fashion.
If you enjoyed the clip from the podcast,
podcast, make sure to check out the next video up here, or head over to watch the full episode down here. And before you go, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Come on. Yeah, thanks for watching.